Hey guys, it's Drinkwater 200 here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make your scenes pop out more, how to make lighting, basically. So this is a very much requested tutorial on people asking how do I do my lighting, how do I make my games look realistic and such. So I'm going to be showing you how to do lighting. I can't really teach you guys how to make things realistic. The way that lighting works is basically something you just learn on your own through reference, preference. It goes all by what you like. You can't just copy someone else's lighting and boom, think your game's gonna look the same. No. But anyways, let's get to it. So right here I have a scene that I created where we're gonna work with our lighting. And we're gonna add some little lighting effects, change the sky a bit, make this pop out more. So what I recommend is when you guys are doing your lighting, you make your sculpts first, do your lighting, and then add your colors, your lights, etc. Or if you already have the level created and you want to do your lighting, then well, you can't really do anything about that, so you're just gonna have to work with the colors you have or change the colors, because this all composites into something that works all together. So colors have to be correct, saturation has to be correct, lighting has to be correct, and world lighting has to be correct. So let's begin. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to go in cameras and lighting. I always choose to get the sun and sky, and for this scene I don't want any outdoor lighting, so what I'm gonna do is I'm going to lower the outdoor lighting. So I can work with my custom lighting basically. So what we're gonna do is gonna go to Skyfleck type. I'm gonna bring this to square. I'm gonna leave this by itself the same. I'm gonna change this to about 80%. I'm gonna bring this up to 100. Gonna turn down the horizon definition, clears the sky. Also turn on the flex shadiness, also clears the sky. I'm gonna turn up the fog to the max. Okay, so we can see our scene is already looking pretty nice. Now you can choose to mess with this, as you can see, but I choose to leave it at 100. I'm gonna bring down the sky saturation to about 70. Alright, now I'm going to get the grade and effects, and I can choose this to make it a bright scene, or I can choose to make this a dark scene. You can also bring up the contrast. Never go over too much. I usually stay in between 20 and 0. Saturation, you can also bring that down, get some weirder type of colors in your scene. You can bring that up. For the sake of this video, I'm going to do 40 saturation, so I'm going to lower it down a little tiny bit. This right here works magic, guys. This right here works extreme magic. So I'm going to show you guys. So we're going to go into the lights. For this scene, I'm gonna just do this for this scene. I don't know about what you guys are doing, but for the sake of this scene, I'm gonna go into the lights, and I'm gonna get that light there. See how it's too bright right now? You're gonna go into the fade angle, and you're gonna put this to 100. Now this makes it more subtle. You can also change the beam angle of the lights, of course. And we're gonna set this lower. I'm gonna set it to about 10 so I can have that realistic light. I'm gonna make this white just for more kind of realistic. And here I'm also gonna add some lights just to give it some extra shadows. Okay. So now we got that. I'm gonna add some lights over here. But these lights are gonna be a little more subtle. And I'm gonna change the color of this light to something more around the lightish blue. Alright, so now we have something that's looking pretty nice. Now we're gonna mess with the gradient effects, the shadows, etc. So for this scene, I'm gonna make it dark. Okay. See how the contrast makes a difference? This also makes a difference. And going into the negative contrast actually lets you change the shadow colors. And you can get something pretty damn nice. So you see how it's a little like tinted red? If you go into blue, tinted blue. Now it's tinted even more blue. Now it's a dark grayish type, but not fully gray. And now it's tinted blue again. You can also bring the midtones. This changes brightness of the scene. And of course the middle tones. You can bring this down. You never want to bring this too down though, because this does make a difference. Highlights, this basically anything that has a light on it. So if I change the light, there you go. So for highlights, since I want more realism, I'm going to bring the highlights all the way up to white. This makes my lights more white and brighter. And I'm just gonna put these back to normal. Alright, so for this scene, I'm going to do a dark scene. So I'm gonna bring this up, bring this down to about 10, maybe lower, about there. Alright, and the shadows, you can choose to make the shadows any color you want. Of course, you can mess with this, change colors. But for this, I'm gonna want a subtle, darker shadow. So it's like a grayish type shadow. I'm gonna bring the midtones up a little bit to show more detail. And now here you can change the bloom. So this is gonna actually make this light look different. So see how we have a little more of a fantasy type of feel now? If you want something to be really sharp, bring down that bloom. You can up the lens flare, bring it down. I always bring down the sharpen, always. It just does a huge difference in game. Motion blur, this is preference. Doesn't really matter, I always bring it down or leave it at 50%. Vision it, you can bring that up if you want some like extra effect, or you can bring it down. And you can make this scene even darker by bringing shadows down, but then again you're gonna have to light this scene. You're gonna have to light this part of the scene if you bring shadows all the way down. And then you can bring up the midtones and have more visual view. Now I'm gonna leave the shadows as they are, or I can bring them up and see the scene a bit more. Okay, so now we got this going on, right? Now we can actually use 2 sun and sky gadgets and 2 gradient effects gadgets for extra lighting effects. So I'm gonna bring the bloom up for this scene, maybe to about 14%. And you can mess with the sun, but I don't recommend it if you're doing natural lighting, like custom lighting. You can also bring this up, of course. Bring this down for darker scenes. But if you bring this down, then you would have to go into your shadows and bring those up for a more visual view. And you would also have to bring up your midtones. Or you can bring it down, but it's going to make your scene a little darker. Depends on what you're going for. Alright, so now back to what I was saying. Let me get the scene back to light. Alright, so now we have our scene, right? And we have it pretty nice. You can actually make it change. Alright, so what we're going to do is go into the gradient effects, and we're going to pop in another gradient effects tool. Now we have two gradient effects tools. We can also pop in a different sun and sky. Now as you can see, we still have that little bit of these sun and sky gadgets and gradient effects going on. You could still see the stuff going on. Now we're going to go into the sun and sky. I'm also going to bring the sun down for natural lighting. Gonna bring this back, and you can change the lighting here, and it won't affect what you already have made, as you can see. So if I remove this, if I remove the sun and sky, you can see that there's a difference. Now anyways, I'm gonna leave this back to normal. Gonna leave this at 100 again. Bring down the horizon definition, bring down the flight, and I'm gonna bring up the fog range, or you can have mixed fog. As you can see, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I'm gonna leave it at 900 for the sake of this. Alright, now you can actually change this around and have a different sky color variation mixed with the other sky color that you have. And you can have some really rare colors that really change your scene. Alright, so the second gradient effects tool. This, you don't have to use two, and you don't have to use two sun and skies, but I usually do this when I want some really rare looking cool colors. So now you already have a gradient effects tool with your lighting done, right? You can actually add more lighting than what you are limited to on Dreams. So you can bring this lighting even more down and still have the details from the other lighting. Now I can bring this up and have a really bright looking scene that still looks good. Now you can also bring up the contrast. Obviously you don't want to bring that too much. You can bring it down, and you can change the shade. Okay, so for the sake of this, I'm going to bring it to 10. You don't really see a difference, but the more I bring it up, you can see a difference. Everything gets more sharper. Now you can actually up the saturation or bring the saturation down if you want less color than when you already had on the other one. I'm going to leave it like that for the sake of this. And shadows, of course, you know. So the cool thing about having a gradient effects tool and a sun and sky or whatever, a second one, is you can actually mess with shadows and it won't affect the other shadows. So if we go down, you can see I'm bringing shadows, but I still have the shadows that I have from the other gradient effects tool. Now I can make this a little lighter, of course. Now I'm going to choose to make it darker, maybe about middle. You could also mess with the midtones, of course. So we can mess with that, bring the scene and make it lighter, and the scene and make it darker. And The bloom, of course, you can add extra bloom by adding 100 here and adding 100 in the other gradient effects tool. But I'm gonna leave that down. Sharpen blur, of course. Motion blur, you can bring that all the way down because you already have motion blur on the other one. And now we're gonna add a little tint of blue to this second gradient effects tool. So as you can see, it's changing blue, but when you're doing rare colors, you want to like have it very subtle. So you want it to be noticeable, but not too noticeable. So what we can do here is we can up the contrast to negative, or we can bring it up and make this a little brighter so it's more noticeable, as you can see. So I'm gonna bring it down a bit, and as I'm bringing the contrast down, I still want that tint, but I'm losing detail. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the shadows, and I can either bring them up or I can bring them down and have a dark blue tint. Now I can go into my other gradient effects tool and I can up the shadows, and I can go back into this one and I can see the tint of the blue even more. You don't really see a huge difference. So now we're working with the bloom, we have a scene working with lights, colors, etc. Now of course we can bring this down, and we could also bring this down if you want a darker scene than what you're limited to on Dreams, or you can bring this up. But now we have a really bright scene, so you can bring up the contrast and bring that. And what we're gonna do is you can bring down the shadows now. So there's just many ways of working with lighting, guys. I honestly can't, like I said, I can't teach you, but I can try my best to show you how lighting works. Anyways, so now we have our little scene here with a tint of blue, and the tint of blue is not really noticeable right now, but you can make it more noticeable, of course, by bringing this contrast a little down or bringing the contrast a little up. So now we have a little really nice scene working with lighting. Like I said, colors do make a difference, so you can change these colors and make it work more. This right here, as you can see, it's a subtle green. You can make it even greener. So now we got a really nice looking scene. And one really cool trick with the camera, you can do this in your characters too, but with the camera for, let's say, scenes, this makes a huge difference. So you see how I have this cute little scene going on right now with some really nice lighting. Oh yeah, also the material that you use does make a difference. So you see how I have waxiness. If I bring that all the way up, look at the shadows, they're more subtle. If I bring this down, there's a difference in lighting. If I bring this to metal, you're losing detail. Okay? So I'm gonna bring this to waxiness all the way up, it's more subtle. I'm gonna leave it at 73 for now. So now I have shadows showing less. And shadows showing more. Alright? So, as I was saying, for the camera, you can press L1 and square, go into the camera settings, and what we can do now is we can go into the aperture, bring this up, all the way up if we want. It doesn't really matter. We can bring it all the way up. And now we can go to the focus distance, and we can bring this up. Now we can choose to bring it even more up and have that middle also blur out, but I want the detail. So we can do this, and we can leave the background a little bit blurred out. And there we go, guys. Now we have a really nice lit scene that's dark, not too bright, etc. And what we can do now is we can mess with the fog. We can mess with the sun and sky and actually use the real sun. Doesn't really matter what you do with it. It's all up to you. Alright, so now we have something really nice. Let me just add a imp hider. That's what I call it, imp hider. This basically hides the imp. So there we go, guys. We got a really nice, well lit scene. And yeah, you can add fog. So if you don't want it to be super sharp and clean, you guys could add fog. I'm gonna leave it at about 200. So now you're starting to see the fog. If I bring down to 100, you'll see more of that fog. And if I bring it to 50, you'll see more of that fog. So now you have a mix of fog and no fog, because you have another sun and sky gadget, and this sun and sky has fog maxed out. So I can do this to 200 or maybe 300. No, let's do 400. So now we have a mix of both fogs. So we have fog in the end, and it's really hard to explain with the fog. But now we can go in and we can go to the second option. No, the third option, and we can bring up the bloom. Of course, you see that little magic happen. And yeah, guys, I really hope this helps, and I hope you enjoy this tutorial. Sorry it's such a long video, but like I said, I can't really explain lighting, so I did my best to show how lighting works, everything you can do with lighting, the difference that it makes in a scene, in a game. And yeah, guys, I hope you have a good day, and enjoy this tutorial, share this tutorial, tell as many people as you can about it. Have a good day, guys.